Good morning. Thank you for joining me today. It's the mission of the Savannah Police Department to serve, protect, and build trust. We, the men and women of this department, are deeply committed to serving our community, protecting our city, and building trust with our residents, visitors, and community partners. Our mission is a dynamic one. As chief, I can confidently state that the men and women of this department strive every single day to execute that mission to the best of their ability. That does not mean we're perfect. It does not mean that at times the work of our officers will not be questioned. We believe that sunshine is the best disinfectant. And that means we will respond to community concerns with transparency and accountability. So, upon the conclusion of our internal investigations, today I will address 2 incidents involving our officers, which have recently received substantial attention. On May 20th, 2 SPD officers responded to a 911 call at the McDonald's on Skidway Road. When they arrived, officers encountered Kwame Williams armed with 2 metal rods, who was actively threatening the 911 caller. One of the officers drew his gun, perceiving a deadly threat. After assessing the situation, he holstered the gun. Mr. Williams' 42-year-old mother, Miss Vernier Ross, was also present. After initially refusing to comply with officers' commands to step away, Mr. Williams was instructed 5 times before being placed in custody. As this was occurring, Ms. Ross verbally and physically interfered with her son's arrest, ignoring the officer's lawful repeated direction to disengage, instead unleashing profane and menacing language and comments at the officers. This created a situation where an officer had to disengage from detaining her son, who was now complying with officers to address her behavior. The officer briefly unholstered his taser, which was not deployed. As a result of her interference and unlawful lack of cooperation, Ms. Ross was physically apprehended and arrested for obstruction. Williams was charged with simple assault and obstruction. Our Office of Professional Standards thoroughly investigated this incident. We understand and acknowledge that there were opportunities for the officers to attempt to de-escalate this situation and use proper language when addressing these community members. As a result, one officer was found to have violated SPD's treatment of others policy due to his use of vulgar language during the encounter. His recommended discipline is in the appeals process. He will receive additional training on de-escalation and effective communication under stressful situations. We found no violation of the use of force policy. We recognize that a portion of this incident was recorded by bystanders and posted to social media. It is important to point out that this recording did not capture the entire encounter from start to finish. It is also important for us to provide the community with a full contextualized account of what occurred. This brings us to the second incident I wish to discuss today. On July 11th, 2024, the Chatham County Police Department requested our assistance in apprehending Marquel Robinson. Mr. Robinson had felony warrants for rape, aggravated assault, false imprisonment, and battery. He was also known to local law enforcement agencies as having a history of unlawful gun possession and violence. CCPD discovered that Mr. Robinson was staying at the Days Inn Hotel on Stevenson Avenue under an assumed name. SPD officers from the Community Response Team and Strategic Investigations Unit responded in a coordinated effort to arrest Robinson. After calling for Robinson to leave his room, he appeared on the second floor balcony. When officers approached, he fled. Robinson ignored 5 lawful commands to get on the ground, to surrender, and be handcuffed. Robinson decided to run through a breezeway, down a flight of stairs, across the parking lot, towards a fence, which he attempted to scale while reaching for his waistband, leading pursuing officers to reasonably believe he was armed and reaching for a weapon. When officers called up to him, he was attempting to climb a fence that led to an occupied restaurant next door. He was pulled off the fence, and Robinson actively resisted apprehension. The body-worn camera footage, which will be released today, depicts in real time the dynamic, uncertain circumstances our officers encountered. Robinson was pulled away from the fence while continuing to forcefully resist arrest. Officers used a variety of techniques, including verbal commands, muscling, body strikes, and a taser to gain compliance. Robinson's resistance persisted. After a prolonged struggle, Robinson was handcuffed, provided water, and evaluated by EMS, consistent with departmental policy. In total, from beginning to end, 9 officers were involved in this incident. After receiving the Office of Professional Standards report, SPD's Use of Force Board met to review the incident. Their findings were forwarded to the Executive Command staff. Ultimately, 7 officers received discipline. 6 were found to have violated aspects of our use of force policy, 2 of whom resigned prior to the completion of the investigation. 1 of those officers received a 5-day suspension, 1 received a 2-day suspension, and 1 officer received a 1-day suspension. 2 of those officers have chosen to continue the appeals process. Appropriate remedial training will be administered. I will be remiss not to acknowledge aspects of this incident and investigation have been covered by traditional and social media. I also acknowledge that there have been questions about both the time it took to conduct this investigation and differing disciplinary recommendation. No process is executed without flaws and conflicting opinions. Since being first notified of this incident and identifying a notification failure, I instituted a 24-hour review of all use of force incidents at the commander's level. Here, in this incident, it did not reach executive command level in a timely manner. In this case, initial recommendations from leadership included termination. Upon further review during the appeals process, the executive leadership team considered the full context of each incident, the officer's service record, and the proportionality of their actions. After evaluating the totality of the circumstances, some of the disciplinary outcomes were modified and reduced. This decision was not taken lightly. While some will ask whether these adjustments dilute our commitment to accountability, I want to be very clear. They do not. Our process reflects both fairness and firmness. Officers who violate policy face real consequences, and those consequences are informed by a comprehensive review, not just a moment in time. Discipline is administered to effect a change in behavior. Now that we concluded the use of force review, our focus will turn to supervisory responsibility and holding commanders and supervisors responsible for complying with our established timelines for reviewing incidents of this nature. As for discipline, we believe that reasonable minds may differ. However, the end result is just and appropriate. With that said, we recognize that use of force is a serious responsibility that should be used with respect for human rights and dignity. And that applies not just to uses of force, but to all of our interactions with the people we serve. SPD officers are trained to make decisions in a professional, fair, unbiased, and objectively reasonable manner based on the facts and totality of the circumstances. While we earnestly strive to do so, there is always room for improvement. To further strengthen public accountability, we are implementing changes to how use of force incidents that are found to be excessive and out of policy are reviewed. Moving forward, all SPD use of force review committees will include 2 civilian participants, 1 faith leader from our local community, and 2 civilian representatives appointed by City Council. So actually 3. The committee will also include a certified use of force expert, and that is a non-SPD member. Now, this is more than a policy change. It's a shift in how we share our power, our authority, responsibility, and providing a voice to our community. These individuals will participate fully in the review process, ensuring that community perspectives are integrated directly into our oversight mechanisms. We know that words alone are not enough to maintain trust. That's why we are investing in sustained efforts to demonstrate accountability. We're expanding officer training and de-escalation, cultural responsiveness, and bias mitigation, requiring retraining for officers found out of policy, and improving transparency in our complaint and disciplinary processes. We also acknowledge that transparency requires timeliness. While we strive to inform the public as quickly as possible, we must also ensure investigations are complete and accurate. We will continue working to improve how and when we communicate with the community during and after critical incidents. These events have sparked rightful concern. We hear it, we understand it, and we are responding, not with defensiveness, but with a commitment to do better. To the men and women of the Savannah Police Department, I want you to know it's the honor of my life to serve as your police chief. I see your commitment to our citizens daily, and I thank you for it. Today, we dedicate ourselves to be responsive, accountable, transparent, and compassionate. On behalf of all the dedicated public servants of this department, I want to assure you that we will continue to serve, protect, and build trust. I'll take some questions.
So, Chief, you mentioned that this took longer than you wanted to. I'm speaking on the Markwell Robinson case, the investigation. You mentioned that it took a long time before senior leaders were alerted. When were you actually alerted? Why did it take so long?
The investigation was not done in a timely manner. There was a breakdown in the process. It was not elevated to the correct level. I became notified of the incident in March. Since then, we've put measures in place to make sure that this does not happen again. I previously mentioned that I've instituted a 24-hour review of all use of force incidents at the command level.
And explain to me the actual use of force used. We've heard lots of rumors from folks. What did those officers do to Markwell Robinson?
The use of force included strikes to his body, a deployment of a taser, and a bilateral neck restraint, in summary.
Was this before or after he was put in custody or detained?
This was during the use of force incident. He was actively resisting being put under arrest, and this took place during the use of force.
Chief, obviously, Markwell Robinson was somebody who was a dangerous criminal at that point. But the question that comes up as well, you had a use of force board that came up and recommended termination for 2 of the 3 officers that were involved with this. What changed at some point, because you went from a termination recommendation to a very short suspension, which is a significant change between what they said and what you said after? What did you see, or whoever saw in this case, and tell me who that would be, that was different than what they saw that led to this?
Again, like I said, there were differences of opinion during the process. During the appeal process, my executive leadership team reassessed the whole situation. They reassessed the initial recommendation of termination for some of the officers. They took into consideration the totality of the circumstances, the proportionality of the actions, and the officer's service record. They looked at each officer's actions and then the actions as a whole. during the incident, that resulted in the change from the original recommended discipline to what I explained moments ago.
But you understand the fact that it's a pretty significant change.
Absolutely.
This was not a, 5-day suspension approximately for these officers is not termination. So how
Right.
far, that's a significant change. What does that say about what the use of force board did to what was said afterwards?
I think what it says is that we took everything into consideration, right? We didn't knee-jerk the recommendation, and the executive leadership team really took their time in breaking down a very complex incident, which resulted in these recommendations. Again, as I stated, discipline is used as a tool to change behavior. I will say that when behavior can't be changed, or something that is so malicious, then that member will no longer be, that officer will no longer be a member of the Savannah Police Department.
Good morning, Chief. I'm wondering if you can share how many active use of force investigations are currently open in the department?
I don't have that information with me, but we will absolutely make sure that you get that.
What weight do you expect the civilian board members on the use of force board to carry in a situation where you're examining use of force cases?
That's something that we have to build out as we create this board. I am sure that their voices will be loud and held in heavy consideration as we review these cases. But it's important for our community members to have a voice in what we do daily. At the end of the day, we serve them. They have to have a voice. So I'm sure that their weight will be substantial during these review committees.
What would your message be to the Savannah community? Obviously, the social media videos of these incidents and some of the media surrounding it has sparked a really large conversation. What would you say to anybody out there that's watching this right now that still feels, upset or concerned about the use of force at the Savannah Police Department?
I understand their concerns and what they've seen on social media and TV. I'm here reaffirming my commitment, my department's commitment to being transparent, to be accountable, being responsive. The fact is, uses of force are not pretty when you see them. We take them seriously. And when we do have to use force to control a situation, it should be done with respect for human rights and dignity. We have a job to do. And unfortunately, you have people that break the law. It does not mean that they should be treated without respect, but treated instead with dignity. I would ensure the community that they have a very good police department and that the members of the Savannah Police Department care deeply about everyone in this community, and we will do our best to continue to serve this community with integrity, with honesty, and even importantly, with compassion.
Good morning.
Hey, good morning.
You mentioned that 2 of these civilians will be city council representatives. Do you have any idea about how they will be chosen and what sort of qualifications they'll need to have?
I do not at this time. That has to be developed between city council, the mayor, and my boss, city manager.
Chief, obviously,
Chief, you were called out by, your department was called out by the mayor for not acting quickly. And so there's a lot of things that are happening on social media where the videos are coming out and they want responses quickly.
Right.
What assurances do you have that can you give the people watching us right now and the people watching us tonight?
Right.
That the department will move faster than it has in the past, in the present?
We understand and embrace Mayor Johnson's commitment to transparency and accountability.
Does your department embrace commitment to transparency and haste in making this information available?
Again, we understand and embrace Johnson's commitment to transparency and accountability. We do too. I do, as chief. We recognize that the public wants quick responses and resolutions. I do too. When we conduct investigations, we have to ensure that they are done thoroughly and accurately at the expense of expediency. However, going through current events, we realize where we can do better and get information out to the public quicker regarding events or incidents that cause community concern. We will do better when it comes to that.
And Chief, you talked about training, some of the additional training that going forward.
Right.
What kind of training were y'all doing before when it came to use of force? I mean, how often was this topic being revisited before these incidents?
Annually. Officers attend use of force training annually, in addition to de-escalation training. That is mandated by the state. We also mandate our officers to go through an additional 2 hours of de-escalation training through their annual training. But that doesn't mean that we need to stop. There's always refreshers out there that we can focus on: communication, de-escalation, and how we treat our community members. So evolving in our training, recognizing some gaps that we may have. We're going to do that. We reevaluate our training and make it more practical and robust, and learning lessons from incidents like this.
All right, the chief has time for 2 more questions.
What's the role of the use of force board if y'all take their recommendation and decide, I don't think we should terminate these officers, we should suspend them instead? What is the role of that board if you're just not going to listen to what they recommend?
Does not necessarily mean that we won't listen, right? Or take in consideration. This committee and their oversight mechanisms have to be built out. But we also have to understand there's an appeals process too, right? There's a process that has to be respected. Again, this committee will have a substantial voice on how we determine and process uses of force, but we do have to develop that going forward.
To neighbors that are going to see this story tonight and hear this incident happened in July, the chief of police didn't hear about it until March, and really nothing's happening until June, and you didn't take the recommendation of the use of force board. What do you say to people that are saying accountability? What accountability? How is that accountability?
What I can say to individuals that have that opinion, that mindset, is to be very honest and transparent. There was a process in place that was not followed in this incident. Again, I've put mechanisms in place to ensure that that won't happen as I take accountability, very importantly, not only for myself, but for my department. The process was broken. It wasn't followed during this incident, and corrective measures and discipline was handed down as a result of it.
And let me ask you this too. You mentioned that you weren't alerted until March. Did those officers, commanding officer, know at some point who withheld this information from you?
It wasn't intentionally withheld from me. Again, the process, it took too long to elevate to my level, and as soon as I was notified of the incident, I immediately assigned it to the Office of Professional Standards and got the wheels turning, and an investigation was launched.
And with officers who did not bring it to your attention, were they reprimanded?
Yes.
In what form and fashion? So can you elaborate?
That's all eligible for open records, Greg.